Focus. Crowds don't think, they feel. And once emotion spreads, reason disappears. A single spark becomes a storm. A whisper turns into a wave. Here are 10 books that expose how the crowd really controls the individual. You're watching Fruity Wisdom, where deep ideas turn into sharp, life-changing insights. Subscribe and stay curious. So let's walk through 10 books that don't just describe the crowd, they decode it. They reveal how humans surrender, follow, obey, and sometimes wake up. Number 1. The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. Why do intelligent people act irrationally when surrounded by others? Le Bon saw it long before social media. The moment we step into a crowd, something inside us shifts. The I starts melting into the we. We don't think, we feel. We don't reason, we react. We don't question, we conform. He called it psychological contagion, emotion spreading faster than logic can breathe. It's wildfire wearing a smile. A whisper becomes a war cry. One man's rage becomes everyone's rhythm. The crowd becomes a current that carries even the calmest minds downstream. And what happens to truth in that tide? It drowns. Because the crowd doesn't seek truth, it seeks belonging. It trades clarity for certainty, doubt for direction, freedom for the feeling of being together. It's comforting and catastrophic. Le Bon warned us, the hardest thing in the world isn't thinking deeply, it's thinking alone. Because solitude demands strength, while the crowd rewards surrender. He showed that civilization's progress often depends on its few resistors, the ones who can stand still while the mob marches, the ones who whisper why when everyone else shouts yes. The crowd builds revolutions, but it can also burn reason. It gives us unity, and takes our individuality. It gives us purpose, and steals our perception. It's not just a group of people, it's an emotion with a pulse, a living illusion that thinks it's truth. Le Bon's message is simple, haunting, timeless. Beware the warmth of the crowd, because sometimes it feels like love, right before it turns into fire. Number 2. Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by Charles Mackay. Centuries before hashtags and headlines, Charles Mackay mapped the madness of mass excitement. He saw that hysteria wears many costumes, tulips then, tech stocks now, but the dance remains the same. He told stories of flowers that became fortunes, of traders who worshipped petals as if they were gold. Tulips sold for the price of mansions. And when the fever broke, silence, ruin, regret. Why do we keep doing this? Why do smart people build altars to illusions? Because greed disguises itself as hope. Because the crowd promises certainty when life offers none. Mackay saw it, the cycle of seduction and collapse. Every generation mocks the madness of the last, while marching blindly into its own. Different bubbles, same breath. Different markets, same mania. Different screens, same spell. He warned that crowds don't remember, they replay. History doesn't repeat, people do. We rebrand the same delusions, give them modern names, and call them innovation, but beneath the gloss, it's the same rhythm of fear and FOMO, the same heartbeat of belief and betrayal. Mackay's insight still slices through centuries. People don't follow logic, they follow each other. They chase comfort over clarity, consensus over conscience. And once the mob starts moving, reason becomes roadkill. He showed that madness isn't chaos, it's choreography. Each dancer convinced they're leading, each investor certain this time is different. Until the music stops. Mackay's mirror reflects a truth we keep avoiding. We are not as rational as we think, and the crowd is not as wise as it sounds. So when the next wave rises, when the world chants by, join, believe, remember, every bubble begins with beautiful words, and ends with the echo of disbelief. Number 3. Influence by Robert Cialdini. Cialdini didn't study power in palaces, he found it in everyday persuasion. In smiles, in sales, in the soft tug of yes, he uncovered the hidden strings of compliance, the invisible choreography that moves our minds. A free sample, a friendly face, a phrase that says limited time only. They seem harmless, but they're hooks. Tiny spells cast in the language of generosity. Why do we fall for them? Because influence doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't force, it frames. It wears the mask of trust, the scent of reason, the tone of care. Cialdini names 6 invisible levers that shape our choices: reciprocity, the urge to return a favor; scarcity, the fear of missing out; authority, the comfort of being told what's right. Liking, the pull of connection. Consistency, the need to appear stable. Social proof, the gravity of the crowd. Each one is a pressure point of persuasion, subtle, silent, effective. And when combined, they turn free will into a gentle illusion. Ever wonder why the word sale makes hearts race? Why applause swells before thought begins? Because our brains crave shortcuts, and Cialdini mapped every single one. He showed that civilization isn't built on logic, it's built on leverage. Influence is the architecture of attention, a cathedral made of suggestion. The marketer, the leader, the lover, the liar, all use the same script, just written in different fonts of intention. And here's the contrast. Once you see the strings, the spell breaks, the illusion loses its light. Awareness is the only antidote to manipulation. Cialdini's genius is that he doesn't just teach persuasion, he teaches protection. He turns invisible influence into visible choice. Because once you recognize the rhythm, you stop being moved and start moving yourself. Number 4. The Wisdom of Crowds, by James Surowiecki. Surowiecki asked a paradoxical question: can the crowd, the same force that misleads, also illuminate? Can the same noise that drowns truth sometimes reveal it? He believed it could, but only when each voice stays independent. Only when people think for themselves, before they look around. When minds remain separate, something magical happens. Errors cancel out, wisdom compounds. 100 guesses can outsmart a single genius. A market, a jury, even a flock of strangers, all can become collectively intelligent. But the moment independence dies, the wisdom fades. When we start echoing instead of thinking, we don't become smarter, we become synchronized. And synchronization feels like certainty until it collapses. It's a delicate balance, harmony or hypnosis. A crowd can be a symphony or a siren. It can sing truth or chant delusion. The difference lies in distance, the tiny gap between listening and losing yourself. Surowiecki's message cuts cleanly through modern life. In a world obsessed with consensus, dissent is divine. Independence isn't arrogance, it's oxygen. Without it, the collective suffocates under its own agreement. He showed that the internet, markets, democracies, all rise and fall on this invisible thread of independent thought. When individuality thrives, collaboration shines. When conformity spreads, collapse begins. So ask yourself, are you adding your voice or echoing someone else's? Are you thinking or agreeing? Because the wisdom of crowds depends on the courage of individuals. Surowiecki didn't just decode group intelligence, he defined its condition. A crowd is wise only when its people are free. Free to doubt, free to differ, free to think before they join the rhythm. Because once independence turns into imitation, the wisdom of the crowd becomes the blindness of the herd. Number 5. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Inside every brain there are two thinkers, one fast, emotional, impulsive, automatic, and one slow, logical, careful, deliberate. In the quiet of solitude, both can coexist. But in a crowd, the fast one takes the wheel. It loves headlines, hashtags, and certainty. It decides first and rationalizes later. Kahneman teaches us that the slow mind doesn't win applause, but it saves us from mistakes. Because propaganda feeds on speed. And reflection, real reflection, is rebellion in a world that rewards reaction. Number 6. Nudge, by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. What if freedom could be shaped, not shattered? What if control could wear the costume of choice? Thaler and Sunstein called it choice architecture, the art of influence hidden in plain sight. Not chains, not commands, just design. The way a question is phrased, the order of a menu, the color of a button. We think we're choosing freely, but sometimes the path was paved before we even arrived. It's guidance disguised as generosity. It's persuasion without pressure. It's manipulation with manners. They call it a nudge because it doesn't push, it just leans ever so softly. And somehow, we move. Governments use it to save lives, seat belts, organ donors, healthier habits. Corporations use it to sell more, scroll more, spend more. One builds citizens, the other builds consumers. Same mechanism, different morality. So the question isn't does it work, it's who's using it. Because every architecture hides an architect. Every choice has a designer, and every system has a story it wants you to follow. Thaler and Sunstein didn't demonize the nudge, they dignified awareness. They taught that free will doesn't die from force, it decays from inattention. Control today doesn't come with chains, it comes with checkboxes. Not orders, but options. Not force, but framing. Freedom, they remind us, isn't the absence of influence, it's the awareness of it. To be conscious of how you're being steered is to quietly take the wheel back. Because in the modern world, every screen, every setting, every scroll is a silent architect whispering, "This way." And the question is, will you follow the design or redesign the way you follow? Number 7. Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. Ariely didn't just study mistakes, he studied patterns of madness. Because our errors aren't random, they're rhythmic. They repeat, they rhyme, they reveal. He showed that human behavior isn't a straight line, it's a circle of illusions. We chase free even when it costs us. We crave fairness even when it fails us. We cling to first impressions like anchors in a storm. We are, as Ariely says, not chaotic, but predictably irrational. Why do we pay more for what feels exclusive? Why do we love limited edition lies? Why do we trust the price tag more than our own perception? Because our brains are storytellers, and every story needs a shortcut. We think we're logical creatures who feel, but we're emotional creatures who rationalize. We don't make choices, we justify them. And the mind, like a clever magician, hides its own trick. Ariely turned psychology into a mirror. He revealed that our irrationality isn't weakness, it's architecture. Every flaw has a function, every bias has a purpose. Our mistakes are not malfunctions, they're messages. He showed how anchoring shapes our sense of value, how relativity makes us compare instead of care, how expectation colors experience before it even happens. We don't see with our eyes, we see with our assumptions. And here's the contrast that stings. The same mind that builds logic also bends it. The same intellect that solves problems also creates them. We are both scientist and subject, experimenter and experiment. Ariely doesn't mock our irrationality, he marvels at it. He reminds us that awareness turns folly into freedom. That to understand your illusions is the first step to seeing clearly. Because the world will always sell to your impulses, but you don't have to buy the illusion twice. We are not broken calculators, we are beautiful contradictions. Predictable in our patterns, irrational in our rhythms, and utterly, profoundly human. Number 8. The Lucifer Effect, by Philip Zimbardo. Zimbardo didn't go looking for evil, he built the stage where it could emerge. A fake prison, real uniforms, real power. And within days, the performance became the truth. Guards became aggressors, prisoners broke, empathy evaporated under fluorescent lights. It didn't take monsters, it took roles. Why do good people turn cruel? Why does a uniform become permission? Why does obedience silence empathy? Because evil isn't born in the dark, it's grown in the daylight of authority. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment revealed that the mask we wear eventually molds the face beneath it. We don't just act the part, we become it. Put anyone in a system that rewards domination and punishes doubt, and the ordinary transforms into the ominous. He showed that cruelty doesn't start with hatred, it starts with hierarchy. It grows in the soil of structure, watered by the silence of bystanders. Power doesn't corrupt instantly, it erodes slowly. It whispers before it commands, it seduces before it scars. And here's the chilling truth, the line between hero and villain isn't a wall, it's a mirror. We all carry both seeds. Context decides which one we water. The same person who obeys today might resist tomorrow. The same heart that harms can also heal. Zimbardo didn't just expose the cruelty of others, he exposed the fragility of us all. He forced us to see that morality isn't a fixed trait, it's a choice renewed each moment. Each time we follow, each time we question, each time we look away. The Lucifer effect reminds us, evil rarely announces itself, it arrives in small, polite steps. A little conformity, a little compliance, a little comfort in being told what's right, until the mask no longer feels like a mask, and the illusion of order replaces the reality of conscience. Because sometimes, the scariest monsters wear name tags, and sometimes, the devil doesn't appear in fire, he appears in us. Number 9. Obedience to Authority by Stanley Milgram. Milgram's experiment was terrifyingly simple, and that's what made it unforgettable. A man in a white lab coat said, press the button. The subject obeyed. From the next room came screams of pain, but the button was pressed again, and again, and again. No threats, no force, just authority. Just the quiet comfort of being told what to do. Why do we obey? Why does a uniform outweigh a conscience? Why does a calm command silence our own scream inside? Because obedience is seductive. It feels safe. It feels righteous. It replaces responsibility with relief. Milgram uncovered a truth colder than cruelty. Most people will harm not out of hate, but out of habit. Not out of malice, but out of mechanism. He showed that evil often wears a lab coat, that morality often melts under mild instruction. No whips, no walls, just words. Please continue. And humanity did. The experiment's horror wasn't in the shocks, it was in the silence. Ordinary people, trembling but obedient, choosing compliance over compassion, following procedure instead of principle. Milgram revealed that civilization's greatest danger isn't rebellion, it's routine. It's the slow surrender of thought, the quiet outsourcing of conscience. He forced us to confront a haunting paradox. The same obedience that builds hospitals also builds concentration camps. The same discipline that maintains order can destroy morality. The same yes sir that saves lives in one room can take lives in another. So when rules conflict with conscience, which one do you serve? When obedience feels easier than doubt, which one do you choose? Milgram's mirror leaves no one untouched. He taught that freedom isn't found in disobedience alone, it's found in discernment. In knowing when a command deserves to be followed, and when it deserves to be refused. Because every time we obey without thought, we hand our moral compass to someone else. And history has shown, they don't always point north. Number 10. The Mass Psychology of Fascism by Wilhelm Reich. Reich didn't just study politics, he studied submission. He asked the question few dared to voice: why do people fall in love with their own control? Why do they obey so passionately, even when obedience hurts them? He looked beneath parades and propaganda, beneath speeches and salutes, and found something primal, fear disguised as faith. Reich saw that repression breeds obedience, that when people are taught to fear their own desires, they seek safety in domination. When freedom feels frightening, control feels comforting. He called it emotional armor, the invisible shell we build to survive authority. But that same armor becomes a cage, it keeps out pain and locks in submission. Reich showed that fascism doesn't begin in governments, it begins in the human heart. In homes that punish expression, in systems that glorify obedience, in cultures that confuse discipline with devotion. We talk about dictators as if they appear from nowhere, but Reich whispered the uncomfortable truth: they rise from within us, from the part of the psyche that would rather be ruled than be wrong. He wrote that every act of blind obedience is a seed of tyranny. That political fascism is just psychological fear, made visible. That freedom isn't granted by revolution, it's grown through self-awareness. The crowd shouts for strength, but true strength begins in softness. The mob worships power, but real power is self-possession. Reich's insight cut through ideology: the outer world only mirrors the inner one. If we repress desire, we invite domination. If we silence the self, we amplify submission. If we fear freedom, we will always vote for the cage that feels familiar. Reich's message still vibrates today, in every echo chamber, every algorithm, every authority that promises safety over soul. He reminds us that liberation isn't loud, it's intimate. It begins in the quiet rebellion of the mind that refuses to kneel. Because the battle between freedom and control was never fought only in nations, it's fought in narratives, in the stories we tell about power, punishment, and pride. So heal the fear, unlearn the obedience, and remember, the truest revolution is the one that happens within. We began with a question: why do crowds control the calmest minds? 10 books later, the answer isn't simple, it's sobering. Because the crowd isn't just a sea of strangers, it's your family, your feed, your echo chamber. It's every voice that tells you what to believe before you've had the time to feel it yourself. And sometimes, the loudest noise comes from within. The books you just heard aren't about mobs or movements, they're about memory. They're reminders that thinking is fragile, that reason can drown in rhythm, and that freedom fades the moment we stop asking why. Le Bon showed us how minds merge. Mackay warned us how manias repeat. Cialdini revealed how persuasion smiles before it strikes. Surowiecki taught us when the many can be wiser than one. Kahneman slowed us down. Thaler and Sunstein showed how choices can quietly be shaped. Ariely reminded us that our mistakes have patterns. Zimbardo and Milgram held up mirrors to our obedience. And Reich whispered the hardest truth of all, that freedom begins where fear ends. The crowd isn't evil. It's energy, raw, restless, real. It can lift, or it can level. It can build nations, or burn nuance. But somewhere in that noise, you still have a choice to pause, to think, to remember your own voice before it gets tuned to someone else's song. Because wisdom isn't found in joining every movement. It's in knowing when to move alone. So stay human when the crowd goes blind, stay awake when comfort turns into control, and when the world starts shouting in unison, whisper truth anyway. You're watching Fruity Wisdom, where ideas stay human, even in the noise. Subscribe and stay curious.